Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Crown Zenith, make sure you check out the Poketown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are going to be closing the book on the Sword and Shield to Silver Tempest format and introducing the Sword and Shield to Crown Zenith format. May seem very similar actually, because there aren't many new cards from Crown Zenith, but hopefully we'll see a few tech cards splashing in the first couple tournaments that we have to look at today. But we also have the Liverpool Regional Championships to look over. It was a 761 player tournament. Myself and Jack both actually attended. I got top 128 with a 5-1-3 record with Rayquaza. Just too many ties in there. I faced some teched out Lugias, unfortunately, for my loss and two of my ties. So, yeah, a little bit awkward there. And Jack played Lugia Archeops himself, got to the win-in situation, but lost to an Eternus Wheezing, unfortunately. But that's our days summed up. Let's have a look at the top 8, who had much better days. We start with Leon, who was playing a DTE Judge Mew to the first place finish. There are a couple interesting choices in this list. Playing no Silene feels quite strange to me, especially when there are some choices in here, like just playing one choice belt, where I feel like Silening back things like power tablets can be really important in multi-prize matchups. Even just getting back things like cross switchers can be really huge. Even things like Lost City against Regis and whatnot. I feel like Silene's such a good catch-all that it wouldn't ever be on my chopping block personally for DTE Mew, but it seems to be a space that Leon's made here. Another interesting card that stands out is Collapse Stadium. This seems to be actually quite nice for Regis, and can also be a spanner in the works for the prize map of some Lost Box builds, especially if their late game involves things like sprinkling onto Genesect. This is similar to things like Volo that we've seen in the past in supporter form, but now in a stadium, which seems pretty nice, to be honest. So I think that's a reasonable include. It adds to your overall path bouncing in the list as well. So I think that's kind of nice. The real question mark really is why there's no Silene in here. Even without Power Pad, I think Silene is just a decent option to give you so much coverage. But that's something that they've opted to go against, and it doesn't seem to have punished them too hard. So yeah, Judge Path still definitely a great way to defend against Drapion and pretty much anything in the format and just keep pace with the lot. He was able to beat Stefan Ivanov in the finals. Stefan was playing Gudra. Pretty interesting. I know it had some highlight placements in the previous US regional, and then from then some people have chosen to play this deck online. I obviously really liked Lost Box Gudra when it first came out in Lost Origins. It was one of the decks that I was putting a lot of time into. But Stefan seems to have taken it on stride and made some really interesting choices with their 60. Choosing to go away from VIP Pass seems really counterintuitive for me for a Lost Box engine, because you play so few supporters, you just need to start selecting and using Greninja as quickly as possible, especially this list where your energy acceleration comes all from gates or the one Raihan that you play. So it feels really strange to not play VIP. Now, I think one of the big choices could be that there's a Luminion in here, so you can cherry pick a supporter throughout the game, which is definitely valid, but also it could have something to do with like going second and having more control over when you time your Gudras coming into play. He may want to cosplay as a one prize deck, just hitting with like a Cram and whatnot in the opening stages, and give himself the option to go double Goo like in a mid game scenario, which could be a big reason why there's quick balls in here as well. It gives you that more sort of control throughout the game compared to VIP, where because you play VIPs and captures only, you essentially turn one have to reveal Gudra Vs, especially when you go second. That can be rough against the likes of Lugia and Mew, who can track you down and gust and take the easy prizes before you evolve into Rolling Iron. So it could just be because he wants to have more control over when he's benching Goos in those sorts of multi-prize matchups, I should say, when going second. Outside of that, is choosing to not play Parasol. It's been a popular choice among the online lists, but he basically just gets to gain space, and Temples seem to be a good enough defense against Lugia in general, trying to deny powerful colorless combos, trying to deny Yveltal being a big blow up, sort of ignoring the Rolling Iron effect. I think especially if you do just boss up an Archeops when you find the opportunity, especially with the Temples, I feel like you can be pretty safe against the Yveltal a lot of the time, and I think this deck will take that sort of long way round Lugia because you slow the game down with Rolling Iron already. So that definitely seems to make a decent amount of sense. Did play the Drapion, but wasn't quite enough to win in the finals. I think it was quite an unfortunate series for Stefan, actually looking back at the video. But still, it makes the matchup close, certainly. I think my only other question mark would be Raihan versus Melanie. Melanie being an additional proactive supporter, which is really nice, and it means that if you don't hit your gate, you can still try and Rolling Iron on 2. And that's something I always loved with my old Gudra lists, giving yourself that backup plan if you aren't going crazy for gates. So that's a small thing there. The other thing is double Roxanne. Actually a really cool combination where you can try and fake people out by lost zoning a Roxanne and then having another one because no one expects you to actually play 2 copies, which is really cool. But also in like Lost Box mirrors and whatnot, you can just be Roxanne spamming them, and that really hurts the Rayquaza builds in particular, where they have this one hit KO potential. They can go all the way up to 400 damage if they have to, but you're constantly denying that combination of rods, gates, Raihans, that sort of thing from them. So yeah, some really intelligent choices from Stefan, even if there are things that look counterintuitive, like quick balls in a Lost Engine, that seem to work out for them. And yeah, what an impressive player. We've said it a million times, but Stefan is just a genius at this game. We have Mikey in top 4 with Rayquaza, and it seems to be slightly adapted from Pablo's top 8 list, where they're just choosing to play one Raikou. Still not playing the Hisuian, which is a little bit scary for me, especially when you go down to the one Raikou. And is choosing to make the space a switch cart by the looks of things, and then swapping a rope for a switch cart. I do actually like adding switch carts into the list. I did so myself. I went to a 2 rope, 2 cart split because I was expecting much more mirror, and they're almost scoop up nets when you're in the mirror. And Sableye's trying to get tricky with Lost Mine damage. So I understand carts squeezing in. I like the space that was made, but I would also definitely think to have a Hisuian in the list. It was still one of my favourite cards in this 60. Just for giving yourself that freedom to grab your one-ofs, especially now that Raikou is a one-of, and it is a really important card in Mirror especially. So it would be something I try and work in the list, but I actually like the 60 quite a lot. I chose to play 10 energy total, and it was just too low. So I think I made a mistake with my own list, and I think giving myself that peace of mind by having 3 of these definitely makes more sense. I went for double balloon, double core in my 60, just anecdotally, because I wanted to have balloons to protect myself against Marnie and Judge decks, because I wanted the free pivot on board so that I didn't have to go continually searching for more switch cards, so I could guarantee an extra 2 cards. Well, to see an extra 2 cards to continue on my chain. But also I really liked double court because I thought it was really important against Mew in particular, where I could remove Path and still draw cards under Radiant Greninja, but that's just my own 2 cents. I think this energy count is definitely the correct way to go overall. But yeah, I think Hisuian probably should make its way into that 60. We have Raz, again, another really experienced, strong player with a Lugia list that I really like, actually. The Irida choice is something that is being picked up on. I know Tord was testing it on stream and also played Skylar to this tournament. The Irida allows you to, A, get some of your water dudes. You know, getting yourself a Luminion for the following turn is never too shabby, or just giving you extra access to Manaphy is not bad. But also it means you get to play these cheeky one-offs without them completely clogging up the list. Like, this is still a very clean 60. It has all the tech cards, has a thick enough, you know, Archeops and Lugia line, still has the double fish, still has the Regitex, but you're also having the clone, so you're respecting the Dura, you're respecting the Aerodactyl, the Wheezing, that sort of thing, just enough, really, to at least get your Summoning Star off, or to have an extra way of pushing through a Dura, as is the Vacuum Yveltal play. Plus Vacuum is another bounce to Path or Collapsed or anything annoying like that. You still have the Pump in here as well, so... And the Belt, of course, makes the most of Raikou in Mirror and makes your Charizard stronger in late-game situations against V-Stars. So, yeah, a lot of good choice here. A real nice space cheat, really, that Irida is. And I think that's a great choice going forward. I do feel the sting of not having Birdkeeper, but it's just something you have to kind of play around and just be fully aware of it. I suppose you weren't too afraid of many, like, stalling decks, because... even though Sander did make top 8, Sander's like always going to do well. He's just one man in the field, and at least things like Mewtwo v Union were far easy plays because Rayquaza just has that damage output to nullify at least that type of deck. So I think it was right to not play Birdkeeper, but it might be something that we have to do going forward because Sander came back and made another control deck, so just a small note there. We have Kim with another Lugia 60. This one's a little bit greedier. It is playing the Birdkeeper, incidentally, and is playing the Vacuum Double Cologne, so definitely a lot of protection here going on in the list, which isn't too bad. But just a 3-2 Lugia line and only 2 Catch Energy, like, it physically hurts my soul and my body. And it only plays 2 research. Like, I would never be caught dead playing the 60. Like, good for you, Kim, for going so far. But this list is greedy as hell. We'll look at Ryan's Mew list. Ryan was actually playing the Fusion build of Mew with captures, so has the high roll available. Ryan's one of the just best players in the UK, has been for many years, and is playing what I think is a very, very clever 60. Has the Parasol in here to protect against Yveltal, you know, and disruptive, like, energy removal Yveltal. Has the Judge in here for hand disruption against the Lost Box players, which is looking pretty good. Has Silene as well for some recovery of certain things. Everything just seems to make sense with the list. It's just a very well ironed out 60, to be honest. I'm kind of 50-50 on the Boss Arena split. I like having the extra draw supporter in the deck, especially like when you go second, this can panic draw cards, but it does seem like everyone's moving towards the boss train, so just a small debate there. Other than that, looking very solid with the list. I suppose he's just saying that he can flip enough heads with catchers to access non-V Pokemon as well. Vinny also made top 8 with Goodra. It just seemed to be a very strong choice for the tournament. This is much more similar to the 60s we've been seeing online, where it has got the Parasols, it has got the VIP passes. Still played the Drapion as well, so clearly the Mew matchup is bad enough that Drapion is like a staple to make it close. But yeah, I've already really mentioned most of the things I wanted to with Stefan's 60. So no need to delve into it too much more. And then we have Sander's control deck. Definitely an amalgamation of cards, that's for sure. We've seen some packages previously. We have Gormandize Lax to top up on cards. We also have a Keen Eye Starly. I think in particular Keen Eye Starmie's in this list because the Pikachu is part of your package against Reggie's, but also, most importantly, against Lost Box. And because Lost Box doesn't play Hand Disruption, Keen Eye makes just like a ton of sense, right? Because it just cherry picks towards that Pikachu combo that then becomes part of your win condition. You play Nets, so the idea is to go Lone Flying P with Parasol and just say it's game against Reggie's or it's game against Lost Box. So that definitely makes sense. We've seen the heavy Cry of Destruction plus Sydney plus the one of Hammer plus Boss Scalamine all be part of a package to deal with Lugia and Mew. Very high on the capes as well to really deny things like Fish Loop into the Yveltal, because of course Sander did previously play Radgardy to deny the Fish Loop into the Yveltal, but now he's playing Greninja because he's playing so many energy. He wants the Greninja to draw cards for him instead. We see some Speed Lightnings to help you obviously attack with Pikachu, but also makes the Aleki a very good card. Obviously this has Sonar to recycle some key pieces going on here and there, which is looking pretty nice. So this doesn't really have like the sort of end game Exodia of a Mewtwo V Union, but it goes back towards the Birdkeeper Eldegoss package that we've seen in the list many times. So yeah, looking pretty good here. Also just has a Miltank because it's an annoying card and can force people to retreat and do all sorts of wacky things, change up their board state just by the threat of a Miltank. So yeah, really good list from Sander once again. An amalgamation of cards that I'm sure he knows the full extent of why he's using all of them. Even things like Snorlax being a card in the list. You know how vital Gormandize is for the deck, so making the space for the unfazed Fat really is respecting things like Lost Box, where you can just buy turns netting it up and doing stuff like that for a few turns is just pretty massive while he's trying to get his Pika rolling. So yeah, definitely some intelligent stuff going on there from Sander as always. So that really does close the chapter on Sword and Shield to Silver Tempest. It looks like the big three kind of remained the big three the whole time. The Mew, the Lugia, the Lost Box. Lost Box adapted a lot, and Goodra got a look in towards the latter stages. But I think we'll look back at this format being like a 4-horse race, really, where it was those decks and Reggie's kind of peaking in at times, being like the main decks of the game. And then there were like Lugia counters, because Lugia was at least 25% of like every day one field throughout these regionals, so it was meta warping in that regard. Let's start looking at some early Crown Zenith format decks. So this was back in December 17th. I can't remember if I actually looked at these decks already on the channel or not, but this was Japanese standard at the time, which means it was pre-Scarlet Violet, post-Crown Zenith cards. And the winning list by Darwin, actually, is adding in the new Zamazenta. This is why I wanted to look at this entire top 8, really, just because of this one Zamazenta include. But I think it definitely makes sense for Kyogre players to strip down the Lightning package and play the Zamazenta. Zamazenta's Retaliate is enough to deal with Stoutland, whereas previously you had to play Snorlax plus just find your belt, which was always like a hard challenge for you. The flat 220 that this does when you're Retaliate KOing is just really, really nice numbers. And also this is very good into Vikavolt because it has an inherent minus 30 on its ability. So I think this covers a lot of what Dragonite would do. Yes, you don't have the same Shred attack, which is a little bit of a shame. But I think this Zamazenta does a really good job and replaces Lightning stuff plus Dragonite in the Kyogre deck, unless you want to go down a Sky Seal Stone Raihan package, which is an alternate option for Lost Boxes going forward. But I really like seeing this change up. I think there are a couple cards that I maybe question, like 2 Hisuian sounds like a lot, but the general concept has already been established with the Kyogre, and I really like seeing the Zamazenta in here as well. Definitely an intelligent card. I don't expect many other new cards to be in these 60s, but this was an interesting Lugia list nonetheless, with a Flying Peak package and Parasol. It definitely looks like some Lost Boxes will have to start adding in like High Rope and Boss, and possibly even Lost Vacuums now, because Pikachu's sneaking into Arc decks, Lugia decks, Sander Control decks, that sort of thing. So I think Lost Boxes might have to adapt a little bit, because they're kind of getting away with no text right now. Slightly more straightforward Lugia here, just a couple captures, makes me a little bit sad. It doesn't really make sense to play a 4-2 line if you're just down to low captures. Like, I feel like more captures make sense than the extra Lugias first. But also I would definitely just cut some of these Flavored Energies to add in more captures. Again, this was back in December, so we were still ironing out Lugias, and that's the one I've just looked at that stage. This was also an Eternal Weezing. This may have put people on the Eternal Weezing train early as well, because again, this was a time capsule of a little meta. A pretty straightforward Lugia there, looking like. And then we have a Weezing Aero with a Flying Peak package. So again, Flying Peak Parasol just being a thing in this format. And we have some pretty straightforward Mews. This is a Fusion Mew with catchers. And this is a Fusion Mew as well. Playing Leon over Silene is very sus. But that other than that, I think a fairly straightforward Fusion Mew. I really only wanted to give this nod back to this regional because of that first place list, because it's showing off Zamazenta. And as we get into the late nights, we have a few more decks to look at here. Looks like a Lugia came out on top. Of course, this was just last night, so this is super up-to-date in terms of deck lists. So these might start looking more and more straightforward. This is playing a Sharon's Care, which is very interesting, and it is playing the Irida, but it's also playing Tool Jammer. So Tool Jammer versus Vacuum. Well, actually, they're playing both, so that's kind of interesting. I think if you play Jammer, you probably cut Vacuum and just play the Cologne instead. But yeah, incorporating the Irida seems like something that people are very willing to go for, which is looking very nice. The regular energy line that we're coming accustomed to, and the Sharon's Care, definitely an interesting choice. In that regard, I suppose it works well with a Jammer as like a mini combo, so something to bear in mind there. We have a Rayquaza which got second. This looks like a carbon copy of Pablo's 60, so people are just happy to jam that. Seems like it was a very well made list, and it's just continuing to do pretty well. We have another Lugia doing pretty nicely. This one does make the room for the V-Guard energy as the additional, and it's playing the Skylar over the Irida. I think in part it's because you play Collapse Stadium, but also in part because Tord said Skylar was better because it could let you get a few more versatile things like supporters for the following turn. So they're either a Tord believer, or I guess also when you only play one fish, the Skylar makes more sense than the Irida, because part of Irida's value is that you can get your second fish out of your deck on the turn that you fish for Irida, if that makes sense. So just a small thing there. We have some Gudras continuing to do well. Obviously, this is after they've seen Stefan do well, so back to these sorts of lists. This one is still picking up the Parasols, though. I feel like if Ivanov did so well without Parasol, they're not that mandatory. Like, maybe they give you a bit more protection. Interesting, this one's playing Parasol, but not Sinnoh. I guess you're still forcing the same things, it's just that the Sinnoh helps you a little bit more out against powerful colorless spam. For some early, like, Gust plays, perhaps. And this one's this is a Melanie build. Oh, love to see it. Yeah, definitely. I really think Melanie is like a really strong play in Gudra, to be honest. It just gives you that consistent rolling iron without the need to be at 7 so hyper aggressively. There's an Arcdura here. Again, not too much out of the ordinary with this list. The High Lost City seems to be a decent shout. It's really weird. I still really think Collapse Stadium is better than Lost City. Like, Lost City puts pressure on Rayquaza quite well. But the Collapsed is so much better against Mew, which is like your actual bad matchup. So I really don't know where to hang my hat on Arcdura. I think you can still force awkward games out of Rayquaza even when you're not lost zoning the Rays. We have Judge Mew, which is heavy on the Path and Vacuum. Looking pretty good. Again, no Silene, so it feels like a lot of people are making that cut from these 60s. Like, I think in this case, I like dropping a belt for a Silene just for that flexibility. Just the one for a Sealstone as well. You typically see that up at 2. And then we have one more Arcdura, so everyone's back to tanking by the looks of things. Displaying an interesting split of Duras. That may just be because they don't have access to the good Duraludon. They have no reason to play the Dragon Dura unless they like the attack, because they're not playing Stadium for draw or anything like that. This one's playing an Avery and a Collapsed and Sinnoh. So again, another bit of a change up from what we've seen previously with Lost Cities. Sinnoh feels weird, especially if Arc Gudra is like becoming a thing. Sorry, if Lost Gudra is becoming a thing, because they'll play Sinnohs against you and that really hurts you. So I feel like Collapsed / Lost City are the ones to play, with one Training Court being like a nice extra card to just help you hyperpot that little bit more often and just not whiff on your like second Dura attacking, that sort of thing. This is a real plethora of supporters, though, leaning into the double gear quite heavily, just to hit your specific supporters when you want them. I suppose you also have Starbirth to help you get there. But yeah, some interesting early cards. We haven't really seen any Crown Zenith stuff. We haven't seen Lost Box with Skystone packages, and we just saw the one Zama sneak into a Kyogre list, which I think definitely makes sense. Let's have a quick look at this metagame. Yeah, so the main offenders are still way up at the top here, with Gudra coming in that little bit. Really, from what I can tell from Crown Zenith, the Skystone is like okay, probably has to go alongside Drapion plus at least another V, like probably just Raikou V. And you have to play like at least 2 Raihans probably to actually get the Sky Seal Stone off. The Zamazenta is more appealing to me. I think it's a bigger upgrade for Kyogre just to gain the space. Like, you cut Lax, you gain space, and you're better into VMAX matchups, because a Cram hit actually becomes way more relevant into VMAXs now, because the 110 into 220 is so much better than the 110 into 180 from a Lax. So I think the Kyogre deck gains the most probably from this set. And I think I haven't really done a Sky Seal Stone build of Lost Box yet, but it just eats into more spaces, and the deck doesn't want that at all. So that's my initial takes on the latest set. There's also, I think, a window of opportunity for Radiant Eternatus. We haven't seen any Radiant Etern decks, really. Like, maybe that's some of this sort of stuff. Oh, yeah, this actually is. Okay, so there's our lucky dip. Where people are trying the Radiant Eternatus. This wasn't a bad record, 7 wins at least. I think there's definitely a potential for this sort of deck to be a thing, similar to what we've seen Sander had. He had the Pikachu Parasol package. A turn can make the Pika Espeon package a thing, which is awkward for Lost Box. I suppose the difference with Pika Parasol is that you can go solo Whereas if you play the Espeon, it gives Rayquaza the opportunity to go Rope KO or Rope Boss KO. So it might be better that you still don't play Espeon and still play Parasol in this deck to protect these dudes. Just something to bear in mind there. I should do a video on this sort of list. But I also think Eternatus has potential as like a controlling package, similar to how we've seen Mewtwo v Union in the past, where we're probably going to play things like Snorlax, Yveltal to help out against Lugia and Mew. And then we're going to play a package for Lost Box, which might include this Flying Pikachu, might include Duraludon, might include other VMAXs, as just a late game, you can't deal with this amount of hit points, because if we've made Mewtwo v Union work, and it's one of the most convoluted, difficult combinations in the entire game, surely we can make this Eternatus work, which is just putting a basic down. You know what I mean? Let me know your thoughts on Eternatus. I actually low-key think it's a control card, especially when we have things like Poncho in format. We could easily make a Birdkeeper Cheryl loop with those sorts of decks as well, because Cheryl works on VMAXs even when they've been Eternatused into play. I'll hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.